Golden Iris Productions presents Missionary Family Adventures, Beneath the Volcano, from the book by Mark F. Dennis. Introduction. This is the story of an American missionary family and their remarkable journey to Japan. It is a story of faith, family, adventure, and growing up between two cultures. It is the story of how an ordinary family from America found themselves living beneath one of the most active volcanoes in the world. The events you are about to hear are not fiction. They are real memories from a childhood spent in the mountains of Japan. They are stories of ocean voyages, mountain trails, train rides, cultural discoveries, and the experiences that shaped an entire family. To understand how we came to live in such an extraordinary place, we begin not in America, but beneath the shadow of a volcano in the Japanese Alps.
Historical disclaimer. This series faithfully presents the writings and memories of missionary Dick Dennis. His observations about religion, culture, and society reflect his sincerely held evangelical Christian beliefs during the 1960s. They are presented in their historical context to preserve the authenticity of his family's story and are not intended as commentary on the beliefs of others today.
Sunday church life. Church on Sundays was an important part of life at the team hostel. Everyone was expected to attend. Most of the hostel students went with the dorm parents to services held in English at the CAJ auditorium. Getting there was similar to going to school, except there was no school van. Younger students usually went with the dorm parents, while older students walked, rode bicycles, or took buses and trains. Some students attended English services at the chapel of the New Otani Hotel in downtown Tokyo. The chapel was especially memorable for Easter sunrise services. Others became involved in local Japanese churches or traveled home to visit their families on weekends. After church, a favorite tradition was going to Yokota Air Base for lunch. For missionary kids living far from America, these simple traditions brought a little taste of home.
Dating as a missionary kid. Dating was not always easy for missionary kids living overseas. Christian Academy in Japan had around 300 students from 1st through 12th grade, but individual classes were small. Mark's class had only about 30 students. Living together at the team hostel also meant many of the students felt more like brothers and sisters than possible dating partners. Finding someone with the same background and experiences was not easy. One of the few serious dates Mark had during those years was with a girl from the team hostel. Many years later, their paths crossed again in a surprising way. In 2001, while Mark was working temporary maintenance duty at Narita International Airport, she happened to be a flight attendant on his flight from Portland to Tokyo. On New Year's Eve, they spent the evening catching up, eating ramen at a noodle shop, and watching fireworks at a festival near a large temple in Narita. A small connection from the past had come full circle.
The love of motorcycles. Motorcycles remained one of the biggest interests for Mark and many of the boys at the team hostel. Most of the older boys had small motorcycles, but only a few owned what they considered a real motorcycle. Mark's 90cc Honda was fun and reliable, but he dreamed of something bigger and more powerful. That opportunity came one winter when Mark and one of his friends returned early from Christmas break. When Mark and his friend arrived back at the hostel, they noticed something exciting sitting in the garage, a beautiful Honda 750 motorcycle. It belonged to the principal of Christian Academy in Japan, who had asked the dorm parents if he could store it there while he was away during vacation. To two teenage boys fascinated with motorcycles, that large Honda was almost impossible to ignore. Unfortunately, temptation got the better of them. Late that night, Mark and his friend quietly sneaked down to the garage. They pushed the motorcycle down the road so they would not wake anyone, then hot-wired the engine with alligator clips and took off into the streets of Tokyo. For teenagers, the power of a Honda 750 was incredible. They rode through the city, sometimes reaching speeds of over 100 miles per hour just to see what the motorcycle could do. After riding around until almost all the gas was gone, Mark and his friend carefully returned the motorcycle to the garage. They pushed it back into place and quietly slipped back into their beds. The next morning, everything appeared normal. Nobody knew what had happened. At least for the moment, they had gotten away with their midnight adventure.
The motorcycle accident. Not long after that wild night, Mark learned just how dangerous motorcycles could be. In the spring of 1977, Mark was riding through town with one of his friends on the back of his motorcycle. It was pouring rain and visibility was poor. As Mark approached an intersection, he failed to notice a stop sign and rode through. A car struck them broadside. The accident was serious. Both boys were badly injured. Mark suffered a dislocated shoulder and a cracked shoulder bone, while his friend suffered a badly broken leg. When the dorm parents and friends from the hostel arrived after being contacted by police, Mark was still unconscious. When he finally woke up lying in the wet street, his first question was, "What happened?" One of his friends jokingly replied, "Shut up, you're dead." When the ambulance arrived, the dorm parents asked that both boys be taken to the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital in Tokyo, where they could receive proper care. A couple of the hostel boys rode along to help the ambulance drivers find their way. Mark was released from the hospital after only a few days. His friend's injuries were more serious and required a metal plate in his leg, leaving him on crutches for some time.
Part 34.
Back on a motorcycle. Despite his injuries, Mark did not stay away from motorcycles for long. Within a week, he was already riding again, even with his arms still in a sling. For Mark, motorcycles represented freedom, adventure, and independence. The accident had been frightening, but it did not change his love for riding. Many weekends, Mark rode his motorcycle the 3 hours from Tokyo back to Karuizawa to visit his family. During warm weather, the trip through the Japanese countryside was enjoyable, but winter rides were another story. Cold temperatures, rain, and mountain roads could make the journey extremely difficult. One early spring trip started out with good weather, but after about an hour, rain began falling. Soon, Mark was completely soaked and freezing cold. Trying to stay warm, he followed closely behind trucks to catch the warmth from their exhaust. As he climbed the mountain roads, the rain turned into snow. After nearly running into the back of a truck, Mark realized he needed to stop. Mark pulled into a truck stop, went inside, and tried to recover. He wrung out his wet clothes in the bathroom and warmed himself with several cups of hot green tea. Then he continued the final part of his journey toward Karuizawa. When he finally arrived home, the first thing he did was soak in the hot Japanese bath, the ofuro, for nearly an hour. After that came the best reward of all, one of his mother's homemade meals. Coming home was always worth the trip.
Taking the train home. During the winter months, Mark and Kathy often took the train back to Karuizawa during long weekends. Usually, Kathy preferred staying at the hostel, so Mark often traveled home alone. Because train tickets were expensive, Mark sometimes tried to save money by buying the cheapest ticket possible and hoping he would not get caught. When the conductor came through checking tickets, Mark became very creative. Sometimes he would simply move to another train car before the conductor reached him. At the next station, he might walk around to avoid being noticed. If an express Asama train arrived, he would sometimes jump aboard and enjoy a faster trip home. These little adventures became part of growing up in Japan. The freedom of Japan. Looking back, these motorcycle and train adventures represented the freedom Mark experienced as a teenager living overseas. Japan was not just where he went to school, it was his world. The trains, mountains, cities, and countryside all became part of his teenage story. Even the mistakes and dangerous moments became memories that shaped his life.
Rock concerts in Tokyo. During the late 1970s, Tokyo became one of the most exciting places in the world for music lovers. Rock concerts were held throughout the year, and many famous international bands came to Japan to perform. One of the most famous concert locations was the Budokan, located on the beautiful grounds of the Imperial Palace. Surrounded by a moat and massive stone walls, the Budokan was a legendary place where many of the world's greatest musicians performed. In 1977, Mark attended his first major concert at the Budokan. The band was Earth, Wind and Fire, one of the biggest groups of the decade. For a teenager who loved music, being there in person was an unforgettable experience. The energy of the crowd, the lights, and the sound of a live performance created memories that would last a lifetime. A growing concert collection. After that first concert, Mark attended many more performances. In 1978, he saw Peter Frampton during the height of the popularity of Frampton Comes Alive. Other concerts followed, including performances by Electric Light Orchestra, Santana, and Boston. For a young American living in Japan, Tokyo provided opportunities that would have been difficult to experience anywhere else. One concert Mark wished he could have attended was Cheap Trick at the Budokan in 1978. The album Cheap Trick at Budokan would become one of the most famous live rock albums ever recorded. Unfortunately, Mark missed the opportunity to be part of that historic concert. Even so, the many concerts he did attend became some of his favorite memories from his teenage years in Japan.
Trying to get backstage. At the Boston concert, Mark and his friend Mike decided they wanted more than just a seat in the audience. They attempted to sneak backstage by finding another way into the area. Their plan involved climbing along the rocks beside the Imperial Palace moat wall. In the darkness of night, they carefully made their way beneath one of the bridges, hoping to avoid security. The attempt to reach backstage was more dangerous than they expected. The boys found themselves climbing along a narrow area just feet above the water below. Eventually, they reached bushes near the entrance area, but they still could not get inside. They had no choice but to make the difficult climb back along the wall in the darkness. Their adventure was exciting, but also extremely risky. Not giving up, Mark and Mike later tried another way to meet the band. They attempted to get into a Boston party being held at the New Otani Hotel in downtown Tokyo. Unfortunately, security quickly discovered them and escorted them out. By the time they returned to the team hostel, it was nearly 4 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, they were able to get someone to let them in through the fire escape.
The disco era. The late 1970s were also the golden age of disco. When Saturday Night Fever, starring John Travolta, arrived in Japan in 1977, disco dancing became the latest craze. Teenagers across Tokyo filled the discotheques, dancing to the Bee Gees, ABBA, Donna Summer, and KC and the Sunshine Band. Like many young people of his generation, Mark joined in and experienced the excitement of the disco era. For missionary kids living overseas, the disco clubs were another way to experience popular culture from America. The music, dancing, and friendships created memories that were unique to growing up in Japan. Mark and his classmates often stayed out late enjoying the Tokyo nightlife. Those years were filled with adventure, music, and the excitement of being young.
To be continued. Memoirs of a Missionary, Bringing True Light to the Land of the Rising Sun, tells the story of my father, Dick Dennis, and his decades of missionary service in Japan. Drawing from his journals, prayer letters, and personal memories, the book records the challenges, victories, and everyday experiences of sharing the gospel while living among the Japanese people. Many of the events presented throughout this series are drawn from these first-hand accounts. If you would like to explore the story in greater detail, simply scan the QR code or visit the book on Amazon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this presentation, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with others. For more content, visit my 2 YouTube channels. Mark F. Dennis at Golden Iris Knowledge Quest, where we explore physics, cosmology, science, and emerging ideas about the structure of the universe. And Mark F. Dennis at Golden Iris Religion Quest, where we examine religion, spirituality, biblical studies, Jewish mysticism, and the history of religious thought. Your support helps these channels continue to grow and allows me to create more presentations, books, and educational content. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.